They told me to have faith, but they didn't tell me what it was going to cost. So I'm walking it out in real time, out loud for all of us. Let's walk it out together. I was in my third year of college and I was doing well academically, but dance was always my first love. I had been dancing when I was a baby. So when me and my friends had found out about this dance program in Atlanta with some really well known choreographers in the industry, we auditioned and we got in. And I thought this was my moment. I dropped out of college and I ended up packing my entire life into my car, drove to Atlanta with my friends with less than $500 in my account. I thought I was chasing my dreams and I was going to be dancing for the biggest names in the industry, but what I didn't know was that I was walking into the first real classroom of my life. The first night in Atlanta, we had rehearsal. And after rehearsal, we had nowhere to stay. So there was a guy from the program who offered us his place for the night, his one bedroom apartment. And literally, what was supposed to be one night turned into 1 month. And it was the three of us rotating between the floor and the futon, no privacy, no plan, no money. And then we get kicked out of the program less than a month in. They said that we weren't taking it seriously. And before we could even figure out our next move, we got kicked out of his apartment too. Literally no job, no income, and we had nowhere to go. Thankfully, after some time, we found another place to stay with one of my friend's family members, but that turned out to be a worse situation than it was before. There were small kids, it's an unsafe neighborhood, we're sleeping on the floor again, and anytime my friend wasn't there, they didn't trust me. By month 3, I finally got a job, but at that point, I was done. I was done mentally, physically, emotionally, and I was so tired in a way that sleep could not fix. And at that point, I had a decision to make. Do I stay and push through, or do I go back home and reset? Everything in me wanted to go back home, but going back home felt like failure. I told my family, I told my friends, I told social media that I was moving to Atlanta and I was going to be working with these big names. I had built up this whole entire narrative, and now I'm about to go back home with nothing to show for it. What were people going to say about me when I got back in town? And that fear almost kept me there, on that floor, in that unsafe place, away from what felt like life to me. All because I was more afraid of what people would think than I was committed to my own peace. But I went home. And I want you to notice something. Notice I left for Atlanta with my friends. I came back to New Orleans by myself. And the moment I got back into the city, I text my mom. And that was the first time I was able to breathe in 3 months. I was back in a place that knew me, that welcomed me, that was able to breathe life back into me. And what I know now that I didn't know then is that God was already in that story before I even knew his name. Before I even had the language of faith, before I was in relationship with him, he was already ordering my steps. Because Atlanta didn't expose my dance ability. It exposed what was in my heart, the pride, and the identity I built around what people thought of me, the need for external validation, the fear of being seen as a failure. And God needed all of those things exposed because you cannot walk in faith at the level that he is calling you to if those things are still running the show. Going home wasn't failure. It was the first time that I chose peace over my pride. And that terrifying, humiliating decision, that was the first real act of faith in my story before I even knew what it was. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." He said, "For I know the plans." Not you, not that audition, not your huge announcement on social media, not your timeline, him. And his plan included Atlanta. It included the floor. It included the futon. It included me getting kicked out. It included me being on that drive home alone. It included me texting my mom and finally being able to breathe. Every single piece of it was inside of a plan that you couldn't see yet, being orchestrated by a God that you haven't even met yet. Faith isn't validated by your comfort. Sometimes faith takes you through those places that exposes what's really in your heart. And everything that gets exposed is everything that God needs to heal before he can build. Now, the Bible says faith without works is dead. So I'm going to give you the 3 P's because this walk requires more than just hearing. It requires you to actually move. The pivot. I need you to reframe every moment you have been calling a failure. What if it wasn't failure? What if it was formation? What if the floor you slept on, the door that closed, the thing that fell apart? What if all of it was a classroom preparing you for something you weren't ready for yet? Stop calling it a detour, because God doesn't waste anything. Not one moment, not one painful season, not one humiliating decision. All of it is working together for something you cannot see from where you're standing right now. The prompt: where has pride been making your decisions for you? I want you to get your journal and write down a moment, recent or past, where you chose what people would think over what your soul actually needed. What did you stay in too long because you were afraid of how leaving would look? And what would you have chosen if nobody was watching and nobody was keeping score? Write it all down. The practicality: there's a decision sitting in front of you right now that you have been delaying because of how it looks. Going back home, starting over, choosing the smaller thing, admitting you were wrong, leaving something you already know isn't for you. I want you to make that decision this week. Not for your audience, not for your family, not for social media. Make it for your peace. Make it because your soul already knows it's right. And then trust that God's plan is big enough to hold what feels like a step back, because it is. He already proved that in my story. Because the walk will take you places that don't make sense. But everything that God allows is preparing you for something that you can't even see yet.